Chapter 490, Guests from Heavenly Wind. The midday sun shone down relentlessly as Ling Tian stood at the hilltop, gazing at the roads below. Her current position was a covert one, able to cover the entire view of the road, yet not allowing anyone below to notice her presence. Unless one ascended the hill and combed the area, no one would be able to discover her surveillance. However, in order to comb this hill, one would minimally require a force of 1,000 strong in order to be effective. While the Shui family entourage was comprised of experts, their population was definitely below 1,000. In another hour at most, the Shui family from Heavenly Wind Continent would pass by here on their way to sky-bearing. Ling Tian wanted to know just what sort of trash would arrive this time around. Would any of them have the ability to go against the Yu family experts present in sky-bearing? Once they entered the city, their first task would definitely be to hide a certain portion of their forces in preparation to be a trump card. Ling Tian was unwilling to let such a hidden card exist, and thus she had to take the chance to analyze the complete battle strength of their enemy. This was her motive for coming here. Following by her side was a lady dressed like a servant girl. She looked ordinary in all aspects, as though she was someone who possessed no martial arts background. Compared with the elegant and outstanding peerless talent who was Ling Tian, she paled even more in comparison. However, if one gazed across the entire hilltop, there were only the two of them. Was it too careless of the overseer of the current Ling family courtyard to go out without guards? To those with evil intentions, this might be the best opportunity. So long as they could kill Ling Tian right now, then the entire Ling family courtyard would end up in chaos, hitting hard on Ling Tian's forces. This would lead to irreparable damages. The ground trembled a little, causing Ling Tian's brows to jump up as she indifferently spoke, "They're coming." But the servant girl smiled instead, "But they're not here yet." This caused Ling Tian to crack into a smile as well as she replied, "They'll definitely come, and in fact, very soon. Such an opportune chance, even if it was us, we would do the same." The servant girl tittered as well, "Yep, I believe that they'll arrive soon. After all, they're more anxious than you can ever be. And besides, if they were to miss this chance, they would not know how long they would have to wait until they can catch you working on your own again. The folly of mortals, how could an obvious chance not have any sort of traps hidden within?" A smirking expression appeared in Ling Tian's eyes, as she praised, "Sister's scheme is indeed profound. For the next step, are you planning to deploy the troops to the south?" Ling Tian actually addressed the servant girl as sister. The servant girl lifted up her head. There was none of the gratitude on her face when faced with a superior, but instead an extraordinary penetrative gaze that shot out from her eyes. If Ling Tian was present he would have gotten a shock, for that was the great Miss Li Zhu. She only leisurely replied, "Not announcing before warning will lead one to fall for schemes in the end. Since we are going to attack, we have to do it openly and through the proper channels, or else it will be taken as an offense. The other influences will be able to use this offense as an excuse to attack us instead, hence not only must one have the ambition and ability, one also must have an excuse to go to war. It does not matter if the excuse is acceptable or has a basis." Ling Tian smiled in response, "What sister is really worried about isn't the various powers, right? But rather, it is the sentiments of the people from all over the world." A gleam of intelligence shone out from Li Zhu's eyes, as she took over, "Since we want to start a war, then we will need to consider the sentiments of the public. Merely focusing on barbarically forcing our way to hegemony will only result in many problems, big or small, even if we unify the lands in the end. What we should do is take the chance while we are conquering the lands to bring the sentiments of the public towards us. That is far more troublesome and complicated." The crashing sounds grew closer, as a great number of troops slowly closed in towards the path beside the cliff. At the forefront, urging her horse on, was the little princess of the Shui family, Shui Qian. One could see that her face was split currently between fear, anxiety, and anger, as well as a tinge of resentment and frustration. Beside her, seated on 3 huge horses, were handsome-looking youths. All 3 of them had on expressions of arrogance, and following them were over 10 elders, dressed in black and silently following behind, but casting their wary eyes all around their surroundings. Behind them were actually more horses as well as 4 chariots. This was a little out of her expectations. One had to know that when the Shui family wanted to invite their members over, all of the war horses were provided by Ling Tian from the Ling family. The report from Shui Qian'er mentioned that roughly 500 members were coming over, and so Ling Tian prepared an excess of 600. However, the facts in front of Ling Tian showed differently. How were there only 500 men present? It was closer to 1,000 men. Going so far as to hide her family's troop strength even in their own report to their own family, what was the Shui family trying to achieve? Seeing the slowly passing troop of Shui family experts, those burly men squeezing in 2s or 3 onto a horse with a discomfited expression, a sneer appeared in the corners of Li Zu's mouth. She turned to Ling Tian. Little sister indeed has godly calculation abilities, to actually have predicted that the people from the Shui family did not come with good intentions. It seems like that's the case right now. This did not come from me, Ling Tian gave a dry laugh, but rather, young noble had long instructed that if anything untoward happened, we must be prepared to deal with more than 2 times the number of troops. Only then can we rest easy at night. This is because any sort of high-leveled opponent would definitely have some sort of trump card, and when they go against another expert, what they're actually comparing is the trump cards of each party. Within Li Zu's eyes appeared a hint of suppressed laughter as she muttered, "Once bitten, twice shy." Because of her whisper, Ling Tian could not catch her words and ended up asking, "What did sister say?" "Nothing much." Li Zu's clear gaze refocused on the troops slowly passing by below them, scrutinizing every single expert with her divine sense. It was only after a long while that she gave a big sigh. The capital of the Shui family is indeed huge, to have at least 10 people in the Xiantian realm. There are even 2 or 3 of them whose skills are not below that of you and Ling Jian. Ling Tian nodded her head in response. That only makes sense. They've come so far into skybearing and would definitely have some sort of preparations, or else it would not justify them coming over. However, why does sister not compare herself with them? Do you disdain them as below you? Li Zu angrily huffed, "That fellow made me promise that if there was no emergency, I would not be allowed to take action. If it wasn't for this promise, then just based off my own strength, I could make all these promising elites all be buried right here on this cliff. I don't know what that guy is driving at, but he seems to have driven his brain nuts. Just your own strength? You can annihilate all 1,000 of them." Ling Tian stared open-mouthed in shock at Li Zu, who was beside her, fright displayed in her eyes. Just by looking, and using the senses of a martial arts expert, Ling Tian had long found out that this bunch of people below her could not be provoked easily. Just by talking about strength, even if Ling Tian, Ling Jian, Ling Chen, and Li Zu combined hands, they might not have a great chance of success. However, Li Zu now was saying that based on her own strength, she could wipe out all of them. Even if it was Heavenly Justice himself, he probably would not have that much strength, right? Having interacted with her for a time, Ling Tian was clear that Li Zu was not someone who liked to brag. Just what sort of frightening methods did she have in order to secure such a frightening victory? This was Ling Tian's biggest question. Hearing her speak, it seemed like Ling Tian was unwilling for her to use such methods. Since she possessed such great strength, able to annihilate so many people in a go and yet protect herself, then why did the young noble not agree to her participation? Was there something odd about this? From below the cliff came hearty laughter. "Oh? Seems like the young master is still recovering from his wounds." The speaker dragged out the 2 words "young master," as though hinting at something different, and one could hear the ridicule in his words. Shui Qianru immediately turned her head back, looking at the youth dressed in black and angrily saying, "Why? You have something to say?" "Ha ha ha." The youth acted as though there was nobody else present, immediately bursting into laughter. "I remember someone bragging during the elders' meeting that he would go over to Heavenly Star and flip the entire place upside down, beating the Yu family black and blue, allowing our Shui family to have a stronghold within that couldn't be taken down. Ha ha ha. Why is it that without even a year passing, he's lying on the bed just like a dying dog? So where is the unbreakable fortress he promised? Where is the Yu family being beaten black and blue that he promised?" The youth's words were extremely acidic and cutting, his words extremely grating as it fell onto the ears of others. Shui Qianru was so angry that her face turned green, but just as she was about to retort, another youth took the chance to jump in as he laughed. "Qianhai, this part you're probably unaware. You must know that the Heavenly Star continent is full of illustrious spirits, to the point that the #1 profligate can also turn into some immense expert in front of the sister of our young master. Furthermore, there are so many profligates all over the place in Skybearing that even if our entire family came over, we probably can't even fight them. The fact that young master and sister can survive in this place can already be said to be not easy. You don't have to be too harsh on them as this will affect our family's unity, ha ha ha." This person's words were even more loaded, with a weird tone, now high then low, as though singing a song. However, the laugh and his words all were dripping with disdain. "So it's like that." The final youth who was seated on horseback used a tone of realization as he replied, "If you put it that way, then young master and his sister have already done a great job for our Shui family. Such a glorious achievement, who in our family could compare? Respect, respect. I'm deeply in respect. Indeed, the children of our family head, living up to the name of twin pillars of heavenly wind. Brothers, we all must learn from them." Chapter 491, Aristocratic Family. The three of them did not give Shui Qianru a chance to say a thing as they mocked with sarcasm. At the same time, the old men behind him had their eyes closed as though they were asleep and did not hear anything. Shui Qianru was angered to the point her lips trembled and her eyes were about to spew out fire. She then said with a chilly tone, "Since the three of you think that you are better than me and my brother, then we shall see how the three of you will be able to salvage the situation." Her words were said with an unyielding tone, and it was obvious that she was unwilling to back down. With Yu Manlu and Ling Tian's means, as well as the fact that they were not in their own territory, as long as the three of them were slightly careless, they would definitely die a horrible death. However, the three of them were still acting in such an arrogant manner and not placing Yu Manlu or Ling Tian in their sights. Shui Qianru originally felt that since they were from the same family, as long as they did not go too far in the way they treated her and her brother, she would still give them timely reminders to ensure a route of escape. That way, she would have fulfilled her duty as a daughter of the Shui family. However, the only emotion that filled her heart right now was anger, and she no longer had any compassion towards the fate of these people in front of her. "Let me see how all of you will die. We will definitely show you our abilities. At the same time, we must also put on a good show for the family." The three teens laughed in unison as they looked at the enraged Shui Qianru with mockery. At the same time, the teen in the middle even looked at her with a weird expression that carried a tinge of lasciviousness. On the cliff, Ling Chen and Li Zu's expressions turned ugly as their gazes turned cold. It didn't matter if the three of them wanted to insult Shui Qianru and Shui Qianhuan. However, they should not have humiliated Ling Tian in their speech. This caused the two ladies on the cliff to burn with killing intent. "After humiliating my beloved man, the three of you still want a good show? If that's the case, I will definitely ensure the Shui family's satisfaction. I will show them a good show that will make everyone in the Shui family put on mourning clothes." The relationship between the younger generation of the Shui family is fabulous indeed. Li Zhu clenched her teeth and looked at the three arrogant young men while coldly saying, "The three of them will definitely not make it back to Heavenly Wind. The three of them deserve to die." Ling Tian gnashed her teeth in rage. One of them said that the three of them wouldn't return while the other said that they would die. Unknowingly, the fate of these three individuals had been determined in that Heavenly Star continent would be their final resting place. However, they did not notice anything as they racked their brains to come up with more sarcastic remarks to provoke and mock Shui Qian'er. They tried to display their insignificant abilities by mocking their own cousins. Shui Qian'er finally could not hold in her anger any longer and whipped her horse to speed up. Amid laughter and teasing, the 1,200 Shui family members entered Sky-bearing City under Shui Qian'er's lead. However, not a single one of them felt anything out of the ordinary, and they did not know that they had just entered the gates of hell. To think that a family with such characters could be around for 1,000 years. There isn't justice in the world anymore. Li Zhu watched the departing figures of the Shui family members and remarked, "To think that Shui Qian'er is still able to think about the bigger picture and the interests of her family despite growing up in such an environment. Even I am filled with admiration." Li Zhu then let out a sigh and thought to herself, from the ancient times until now, all of these so-called aristocratic families would make use of a lady's attachment and loyalty to the family and make them sacrifice themselves for the family. However, they had never thought about letting the males of the family make sacrifices for the family. Just how many ladies have been destroyed because of this? Even if a man were to sacrifice himself for the family and marry a woman who he doesn't love, he would still be able to take his beloved lady as a concubine or keep her as a mistress. At the end of the day, he would still be able to gain what belongs to him. But what about a woman in the aristocratic family? The moment she sacrifices herself and marries someone she doesn't love or even harms the one she loves, would any form of reparations be able to make up for her sacrifice? Women are emotional creatures after all, and after giving something out, it was impossible for them to take it back. After losing something, it would be impossible for them to regain it. Thus, beautiful women suffering unhappy fates is an unchangeable fact since the ancient times. Li Zhu let out a sigh in her heart. Her admiration for Shui Qian'er was one that came from the depths of her heart. In her past life, she was also like Shui Qian'er, who was tied down by the interests of her family and had to go against her own character and wishes. She did not have a single shred of freedom. In fact, she was even more resolute than Shui Qian'er. Thus, Li Zhu's enthusiasm could not help but be put out and a wave of heartache accompanied it. Is he currently safe? The Shui family is a 1,000-year-old aristocratic family after all. The foundation of 1,000 years is not something that the will of a woman would be able to go against. Ling Tian said with consideration. Chi. Li Zhu sneered, "What 1,000-year-old aristocratic family? Little sister, even though you are extremely intelligent, you have only seen the strength of the family and the depths of its foundations. However, you have never thought about what was truly hidden within all of its glory. You have not truly experienced what goes on within an ancient aristocratic family. The inner secrets that are hidden within the shadows are dirty and ugly to the point people cannot imagine. The pain and torture that one goes through is something unbearable. They have been alive for 1,000 years and have fought for 1,000 years. At the same time, they have also decayed for 1,000 years. There is no need to be afraid of them. There is nothing to be wary about. As long as we light a fire within their family, it will be enough to burn them all to death." Li Zhu said with disdain towards the so-called 1,000-year-old aristocratic family. "How can this be? It is impossible, right? They are a family that has been around for 1,000 years after all." Ling Tian looked at Li Zhu with shock and was completely dumbfounded. At the same time, the words that Li Zhu had just said were still resounding in her mind, and she was unable to digest them. She could not help but think to herself, even if I have not truly experienced the inner workings of an aristocratic family, could it be that you have experienced it yourself? Ling Chen had never doubted Li Zhu, and the more she interacted with her, the more she felt that Li Zhu was extremely unfathomable. Such a mysterious feeling was something that she had only felt from Ling Tian. Just what was the origin of this Miss Li Zhu? Why was she so mysterious? Why is it impossible? Li Zhu pointed at the Shui family members in the distance. From the conversation between the four of them and the silent attitude of the Shui family elders, I can see that the inner conflict in the Shui family has evolved to the point where it is a life and death struggle. It has evolved to the point where it can't be solved by a party taking a step back or compromising. Their current trip to Skybearing was definitely a decision of the next family head, and the party before our eyes is probably the party who has the upper hand in the Shui family conflict. From this alone, it is obvious that it is far easier to deal with the Shui family. After all, they do not have an iron-fisted family head. The Yu family has the ambitious Yu man Lu to suppress all parties with his cold-blooded and ruthless means. At the same time, he has the aid of his two brothers who are without ambition. However, the Shui family does not have all of these. As such, there is no need to fear the Shui family. Besides that, Li Zhu said with a cunning grin, they think that as long can come to Heavenly Star to produce some results, the position of successor would definitely be in their hands and they would be able to suppress Shui Qianhuan for good. However, they never imagined that their appearance here is a part of Ling Tian's multi-layered plan and that it will be impossible for them to return alive. If it was just Shui Qian'er and Shui Qianhuan, the losses of the Shui family wouldn't be too huge and they wouldn't be at the risk of destruction. At the same time, once the matters in Heavenly Star are concluded, the internal conflict in Heavenly Wind would definitely come to a conclusion as well. Despite that, to think that they would be foolish enough to send so many elites and 3 successor candidates as reinforcements. This was no different from seeking their doom. Why is there a need to fear such characters? Ling Chen's face revealed a smile as she silently listened to Li Zhu's analysis. Don't think that I am an ignorant lass. Even though you look extremely honest, you have many tricks and schemes up your sleeves. As a capable aide personally groomed by Ling Tian, how honest could you possibly be? Li Zhu looked at Ling Chen and chuckled, if not for your own plans to supplement Ling Tian's plans, even if the Shui family was ambitious, they would not have sent so many reinforcements and definitely not successor candidates. Ling Chen revealed a smile and said, in such chaotic times, I am only serving my lord. The young noble always said that the most important thing was for the people around him to be happy. In this life of mine, as long as young noble is able to lead a happy life, all of my sacrifice and effort will be worth it. Then she let out a long sigh as she looked towards the horizon. Elder sister is right. I have not experienced the life in an aristocratic family, and in my heart, the heavens, earth, all of my actions, and all of my thoughts are only for young noble alone. I do not, and will not, place anyone else in my heart. This is what I think the happiness of a lady truly is. That's right. Li Zhu looked at Ling Chen with envy, you are truly luckier than any other lady in the world. Although you are only Ling Tian's maid, who would dare treat you like a maid? Your life and status in the Ling residence are only second to Ling Tian and you have even more freedom and authority than those so-called little princesses. In the future. Li Zhu smiled mysteriously, do you know what you will be doing in the future? What I will be doing in the future? Ling Chen looked at Li Zhu with bewilderment, what do you mean by that? After Ling Tian unites the entire world, what do you think you will be doing? Li Zhu replied with a bright smile, apart from you, who else would be fitting to have the title of Empress? Chapter 492, Unexpected. Ah! Empress? Ling Chen was astounded, how can it be? I am only a maid. I have never thought about that. I only want to be by my young noble's side and even being young noble's concubine is a status far beyond my reach. How can I be the Empress? In agitation, Ling Chen began stuttering and completely lost her cool. Li Zhu chuckled and said with mysterious wisdom, because of Ling Tian's profligate behavior when he was young, there aren't many ladies by his side, and there are also far too few ladies capable of moving his heart. Up until now, you're the only one who truly moved his heart. As for Bing Yan, Shui Qian'er, Zhou Yanzhu, Princess Jiayu, or at the very most Wei Zhuan, however, Wei Zhuan is too far at the borders and she can be ignored. Of these few people, who would have the right to become the Empress? Li Zhu then let out a warm smile. The title of Empress is not the same as the status of being the first wife. If you are just marrying an ordinary aristocratic family disciple, your status will probably be of concern and could result in obstruction. In fact, it may even be a stain in your life in the future. However, things are completely different when it comes to being an empress of a new empire. The empress is the mother of the empire, and this status has a huge meaning to the situation of the world. Yu Bingyan has the background of the Yu family, Shui Qian'er has the background of the Shui family, Zhou Yanzhu has the background of the Zhou family, and Zhao Yu has the background of the previous sky-bearing imperial family. Regardless of how virtuous any of them are, none of them have any hope of becoming the future empress. Even though any one of them has the status to become Ling Tian's first wife, none of them can become the empress of a new empire. Thus, there are no suitable candidates other than you. Even if you aren't willing to become the empress, you will definitely be pushed onto the throne after Ling Tian unites the continent. This is something that I am absolutely sure of. If not, why would he not hand over the courtyard to anyone else but you? Do you still not understand his intentions? Then, even if Bing Yan and the rest aren't suitable, there is still you. How can this little sister fight with elder sister? Ling Chen said carefully. She wasn't trying to be pretentious, but she was truly apprehensive of the title and didn't think that she had the ability to be the mother of the continent. Me? Li Zhu burst out laughing. You are probably unaware of this. Even if you give Ling Tian 1,000 guts, he would never dare to make me his empress. Even the background of the four added together would not make Ling Tian as wary as my background. As long as Ling Tian is willing to keep me by his side, I will be satisfied. Ah! Ling Chen covered her mouth in shock. To think that my elder sister Li Zhu has such a terrifying background. However, what kind of a background could she have? There doesn't seem to be such a power in the world. Even more frightening than the four of their backgrounds combined. My goodness! What kind of a background would that be? Ling Chen took in a breath of cold air. However, even after running through her memory plenty of times, she could not think of any power capable of rivaling the four families added together. Haze, no matter what, all of these are things for the future. Victory and defeat are not determined yet, and it is far too early to talk about it. Let us go. It seems like the Nangong family isn't ready yet. We have probably overestimated their strength. Li Zhu ended this pointless conversation. Oh, Ling Chen recovered from her shock and immediately remembered the Nangong family's plans. Her mind regained clarity and she said, perhaps not. Even though we pretended to conceal ourselves when coming out, the Nangong family must have definitely received news of us. The chess piece that young noble had planted half a year ago is finally exhibiting its use. Thus, I estimate that the Nangong family has already begun their operation and are on our return journey route. Ling Chen said with absolute confidence. If Nangong Yu is truly wise, she would choose to stop this operation right now and insist on the retreat of her Nangong family. She should hide in the deep mountains to recuperate and build up the strength of her Nangong family. In the eyes of the ignorant, we would be seemingly letting our guard down, but if one thinks through things carefully, a big loophole would immediately be spotted. Why is it such that our defensive net was previously so tight, but after the Nangong family decided on their plan, our defenses became so loose? With such an obvious opening, how can there not be a trap hidden? Li Zhu analyzed calmly and accurately pointed out the flaw of Ling Chen's plan. It is as though there was a pillow magically appearing when you want to sleep, And your enemy stretching his neck out for you when you want to kill him. Aren't things going too smoothly? If it was you, wouldn't you find it dubious? Ling Tian pondered for a moment and could not help but be a little disappointed. That's right, while there aren't any flaws in my plan, a plan without any flaw is the biggest flaw in itself. I was taking things for granted. Li Zhu chuckled before saying, thus, I estimate that it is very likely for our plan to fail. If Ling Tian who is the one in charge of this operation, then we will definitely succeed. However, Ling Yu is probably rushing here right now to stop Ling Tian who from acting rashly, so it is unlikely for our plan to succeed. Alright then, we can only make another plan in future. Ling Tian smiled calmly, there will always be chances. Actually, it doesn't really matter. So what if they give up their plan? Can't we find them at their doorstep? Li Zhu sneered, don't forget, Ling Tianlong was the one who attacked us first and we can use that as an excuse to take revenge. We will definitely be in the right and no family would possibly speak up for a declining Ling family. Ling Tian replied with a smile and walked out of their hiding spot. The two of them then got onto their horses and returned to the Ling family courtyard. For their meticulous plan to fail so easily, while the both of them seemed extremely casual on the surface, they could not help but feel a tinge of discomfort in their heart. It was as though their full-powered fist strike had landed in midair. Thus, the two of them had a gloomy face and did not say anything on the way back. After making a corner, the Ling family courtyard's majestic buildings were in sight and they were only a couple of miles away from the courtyard. Ling Tian then let out a sigh, it seems that this Ling Yu is truly intelligent. She is a worthy opponent indeed. Li Zhu agreed, that's right, we have underestimated the intelligence of our enemy and it is our biggest mistake today. Before she could finish her sentence, Li Zhu's mouth was already wide open in shock as an unladylike curse could be heard, FK. What are they doing here? This is their intelligence? Aren't they too intelligent? Ling Tian's face turned red as she thought to herself, everything is good about this elder sister Li Zhu. Her graceful figure is like a deity and charming appearance like a fairy. However, why must she speak in such an uncouth manner? She then followed Li Zhu's line of sight and could not help but be astounded as well. An indescribable feeling rose in her heart and in excitement, she almost copied Li Zhu. Before the word could leave her lips, Ling Tian swallowed it back with great difficulty. However, the expression on her face was an extremely odd one. Because at the foot of the mountain in front of them, a large gang of troops stealthily appeared. There were more than 100 men and they blocked the path completely. At the same time, there were plenty of figures moving about in the shadows and their rustling footsteps could be heard. It was apparent that another group of people was sprinting to cut off their escape route. The person in the lead was a burly man with a full curly beard. His shoulders were broad but his tummy was round and he glared at Ling Tian ferociously. He was Ling Tian who. Behind Ling Tian who were three well-built men, guarding Ling Tian who like he was a precious treasure. They had a confident smile on their face and looked at Ling Tian with undisguised hatred. At the same time, there was another individual overflowing with enmity and killing intent. She was the intelligent person that Ling Tian had just praised, Ling Yu. Both Li Zhu and Ling Tian never imagined that the plan that they originally felt was hopeless had actually succeeded. Furthermore, it was an overwhelming success and everyone who they wanted to draw out was right in front of their eyes. This huge and sudden surprise rendered both the ladies speechless with their mouth and eyes wide open. But in the eyes of the Ling family members, the shock of the two girls looked like extreme fear. Miss Ling Tian, it has been long since we last met. Ling Tian who said with delight as though victory was already within his grasp. His tone was extremely lofty and he acted in a hypocritical manner. Seeing the look of shock on the faces of these two ladies, Ling Tian who was ecstatic. It was impossible for them to be acting. If they were acting, then their acting skills were far too mystical. Second Master Nangong, what are you doing? Are you trying to stop me from returning home? Ling Chen was careful not to let her excitement show on her face, in case they would feel something was wrong and escape the trap. Nangong Tian, who laughed, suddenly feeling as though he was a big cat playing with two poor mice under his claws. In his eyes, Ling Chen's was only trying to put on a brave front. He gave out a lascivious smile and said, "What do I want to do? What else do you think I will be doing? Could I be doing anything else?" He then obscenely moved his hands in a suggestive manner to indicate the outline of her body while following her curves with his eyes. Chapter 493, Crazed Hatred. Ling Chen's face turned dark as she reprimanded, "Nangong Tian, who, you dare to talk to me in such a tone in the territory of sky-bearing? Your Nangong family is bold indeed. Do you guys not want to live anymore?" Ha ha. Mournful laughter could be heard, and Nangong Yu walked forward with bone-deep hatred in her eyes. "Ling Chen, Ling Tian killed my father in cruelty. Do you think that there is a need for us to be courteous to your Ling family?" Li Zhu glared at Nangong Yu's slightly distorted appearance and finally understood what went wrong. "Since young noble killed your father, all of you can go and find young noble for revenge. What is the point of all of you blocking two weak ladies like us?" Nangong Yu ignored Li Zhu completely as she said while gnashing her teeth, "Ling Chen, you are only a lowly servant. Are you curious why I would choose you as a target? Ha ha." Nangong Yu's eyes turned bloodshot and she let out a crazed laugh. "Your biggest sin is the fact that you are far too beautiful. Every guy wants to talk about you and treat you like a treasure. Furthermore, Ling Tian also trusts you so much to allow you to manage all of his forces. What are you? You are no more than a lowly slave. You are just a slave that can be bought with money. You are just You do not deserve to be alive in this world. If I kill you, I believe that Ling Tian will definitely be heartbroken. He will definitely be devastated. Ha 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 ha, I want his heart to be shattered and be filled with devastation." Nangong Yu then continued with a malevolent expression, "Do not dream that anyone will come to save you. I have to say that you are far too careless. To think that you will only bring out a single maid. I originally thought that this might be a trap, but the forces of the Ling family are all stationed a few miles away. With our current strength, taking you down is as simple as snapping our fingers. We are lucky indeed. Doesn't Ling Tian treat you like a precious gem? Ha ha ha. I will make this precious gem of his be under the bodies of over 100 men. Since Ling Tian killed my father and destroyed the hopes of my Nangong family, I will let Ling Tian be the biggest cuckold on the continent. I will let his most beloved woman die from pleasure under the bodies of over 100 men. I will make sure you suffer a fate worse than death." Nangong Yu said viciously, "Don't worry, I won't kill you. I will catch you, and after the guards under my command enjoy themselves fully, I will sell you to the dirtiest brothel in Gold Jade City and allow boorish men to play with you and humiliate you every day. Humiliate a lady like you who should not have such a status." Seeing Nangong Yu's crazed and distorted expression, Li Zhu let out a sigh. Her original deduction was extremely accurate and there was indeed a huge flaw in their plan. However, their plan still succeeded because Li Zhu missed 2 points. First, the information network of the Nangong family was greatly lacking, and they were unaware that Ling Chen wasn't a weak and helpless lady. In fact, she was a top-notch expert in the world today, and there weren't many capable of subduing her. Second, which is probably the greater reason, was because of a woman's jealousy. Once a woman is filled with jealousy, she will turn completely unreasonable. Especially when the jealousy that she has been suppressing for a long time explodes forth, it would be akin to a woman losing her mind. She would be crazy to the point that she hated the fact that the world could not be destroyed. It seems like Nangong Yu's jealousy towards Ling Chen was far too intense and was probably planted a long time ago. Regardless of looks or talent, Ling Chen was more than a notch above Nangong Yu. Or perhaps, It could be said that the two of them were on completely different levels and could not even be compared. Li Zhu guessed that this probably resulted in disequilibrium in the heart of the usually spoiled Nan Gongyu. However, this alone wasn't enough. Li Zhu could feel that Nan Gongyu would always pause unnaturally whenever she said the words Ling Tian. At the same time, it seemed as though there was a deep hatred and bitterness accompanied with anger and hopelessness. All of this made Li Zhu come to a realization. After Nan Gongyu entered Sky Bearing, she first became enemies with the Yang family and later realized that Ling Tian was merely concealing himself. Following that, everything that happened fully displayed Ling Tian's strength and talents. That originally restless maiden's heart of hers was naturally ensnared. Following that, they began to work together with the Ling family for mutual benefits, and Nan Gongyu felt a trace of hope in her heart. However, her hope was short-lived, and her father died in Ling Tian's hands. This completely destroyed Nan Gongyu's one-sided fantasy. With such a mental blow, Nan Gongyu made a crazy decision. She wanted to destroy the Ling family, destroy Ling Chen, destroy the Ling family courtyard, destroy Ling Tian, and at the very end, destroy herself. Before all of that, Nan Gongyu decided to make Ling Chen her first target. This was because Ling Chen's outstanding qualities made Nan Gongyu, who was always on her high horse, feel a sense of inferiority. As long as Ling Chen was by Ling Tian's side, Nan Gongyu would not have any confidence to fight for anything. At the same time, Ling Chen was the most beloved woman of her greatest enemy. Thus, Nan Gongyu did not want to just kill Ling Chen. She wanted to humiliate, insult and trample over Ling Chen before that. What a crazy woman! Li Zhu let out a sigh. At the same time, her thoughts floated to Ling Tian. Just how many ladies did he provoke, and how many of them would go crazy for him? From an infamous profligate son to a wise and majestic leader. He was a young hero who had unparalleled literary talents and outstanding martial arts. The ugly duckling had turned into a beautiful swan. This was a melodramatic plot that no young maiden could resist. Especially the ladies who used to look down on Ling Tian. When Ling Tian explodes forth with talent, they would first be in doubt, then filled with curiosity, and finally investigating the matter on their own. With the many legends as rock-solid evidence to prove Ling Tian's outstanding qualities, they would then be trapped in their fairy tale. It was truly a good method to pick up girls. It was difficult for any young lady to resist the story of a frog becoming a prince. No matter how good Ling Chen's self-restraint was and how developed her mental state was, she was still a young lady who was less than 20 years old. Nan Gongyu's vicious words had angered her to the point that her whole body was trembling. Nan Gongyu's words were far too vicious and despicable. To a lady, such a humiliation was unacceptable. Even the thought of it would make one feel complete disgust, much less experiencing it for herself. Ling Chen growled with palpable anger, "Nan Gongyu. I never imagined you to be so vicious. However, do you think that all of you will have the strength to do that?" Nan Gongyu smiled sinisterly, "Ling Chen, do you really think that I am unaware of your martial arts? If you really didn't possess any martial arts, how would you dare to come out alone? While I have to admit that you have concealed the matter extremely well, there is no secret in the world that won't be revealed. While you only took action a single time in Sky Bearing and waved a whip around a few times, you completely revealed yourself at that time. But even if your martial arts aren't weak, can I be any weaker than you? Do you know how long I have been planning to kill you? Do you think that I am joking with you?" Nan Gongyu then stretched out her arms and pointed at the people around her. "All of these men are the iron-blooded warriors of my Nan Gong family and the final troops that my Nan Gong family can bring out. However, it is also our strongest force. Besides that, my second uncle is leading them personally. Do you think the two of you will be able to escape from my heaven-encompassing net? So what if you two know martial arts? What use will it be? We are still a couple of miles away from your Ling family courtyard and I don't believe that they can save you before we succeed." That's right, someone like you who has lived your life in luxury probably hasn't killed before. Ha ha ha. Take action. Following Nangong Yu's orders, Nangong Tian Hu let out a laugh and waved his hands. Brothers, charge. The first one to catch this peerless beauty will be the first to enjoy her. You will also be the first one to make Ling Tian a cuckold. I promise all of you that everyone will have a share of this beauty in front of you. Didn't you hear that this last knows martial arts? She will definitely be able to endure our torment. All of you are in luck. All the Nangong family warriors let out a loud roar and their faces were filled with lascivious smiles as they pounced like wolves towards Ling Tian. Not to mention touching such a beauty, it was difficult for them to even see a beauty like Ling Tian. Now, as long as they could capture this weak and helpless beauty in front of them, they would be able to do as they wished. As these warriors fantasized about pressing Ling Tian down beneath them and the possible expressions on her face, their faces flushed red from excitement and they charged forward like raging bulls. At this moment, only Nangong Yu realized that something was wrong. While there was shame, anger, and indignance in her eyes, there wasn't any fear, panic or confusion. Could it be that she isn't afraid at all? What does this mean? Is there something that I missed? Anger. Extreme anger. This was the first time Ling Tian had the urge to rip the people in front of her into shreds. Even when Long Xiong and the Yang family surrounded their Ling residence, the gentle Ling Tian had avoided the possibility of being stained with blood. But right now, for the first time in her life, Ling Tian was boiling with an uncontrollable killing intent. The usually warm smile by her lips had exploded forth with a frightening killing intent. Chapter 494, Li Zu's Majesty. At this moment, including Ling Tian, Nangong Tian Hu, and Nangong Yu, no one noticed the ordinary-looking maid behind Ling Tian disappear. However, what would a little maid be able to do? The moment Nangong Yu issued her command, the burden had suddenly disappeared as though she had never appeared before. The moment the maid disappeared, the temperature of the surroundings seemed to have dropped and a cool wind began blowing. At the same time, muffled groans sounded softly in the rear, but the men who were blinded by lust completely ignored those sounds. Li Zu's figure was like lightning, weaving through the surroundings of the battlefield and her dagger gleamed in the sun. One by one, the many guards of the Nangong family hiding in the dark and the experts surveilling the area died under her dagger. In just a short few moments, more than 15 people died under Li Zu's hands. At the moment, Li Zu no longer looked like an ordinary maid and her eyes were filled with coldness. Not a single speck of dust could be seen on her dagger and not a single drop of blood remained on it. It was like a sacred jade tree in the imperial palace, untainted by even a single speck of dust. After the dagger was pulled out of a person's throat, it would be swiftly stabbed into another person's heart. Li Zu rhythmically reaped the lives of the many experts like she was a farmer, reaping the harvest of her crops with joy and even a tinge of excitement. Li Zu was extremely focused at the bloody task at hand, and she even felt that it was filled with art. In fact, she did not even look back for a moment as though she wasn't worried in the slightest about Ling Tian facing over 100 experts alone. Li Zu knew that their mission today wasn't to wait for reinforcements but to annihilate their enemies. In the first half of the battle, her own mission was to completely wipe out the Nangong family experts who were in the periphery. Not a single Nangong family member who assaulted them today would be allowed to leave. They must all die today. Not for the reason of concealing their secrets but because of the words that Nangong Yu had said previously. Those words of hers had sentenced the Nangong family to the fate of being wiped out and erased from the world forever. Behind her, Li Zu could feel an exploding ball of cold and the blistering hot 7th month seemed to have turned into the chilly winter. Li Zhu revealed a smile on her face. This present scenario was intentionally created by her, and Ling Tian finally revealed killing intent. Furthermore, she revealed her newly cultivated 8th level of the Divine Ice formula from the start. It was sufficient to see the depth of hatred she had towards Nan Gongyu and the other Nan Gong family members. For Ling Tian to not send out a signal to Ling Lei and the rest who were already hidden in ambush, it meant that she wanted to personally take care of the people in front of her. This was the result that Li Zhu wanted to see the most. The thing which Ling Tian lacked the most would be forced out by Li Zhu during the period when Ling Tian wasn't here. If not, Ling Tian would still face some dangers in the future. The thing that Ling Tian lacked the most was undoubtedly the intent to kill. Currently, it seemed like Li Zhu was extremely successful. All of these years, Ling Tian and Ling Jian were like two tall mountain peaks guarding in front of Ling Chen. While Ling Chen had a set of outstanding martial arts, she never had the chance to fight someone to the death. In recent times, the only chance she had was when she faced Yi Beif, but she was unable to kill her opponent at that time. Thus, Ling Chen's hands were still clean up until now, and she had never touched the blood of anyone else. Today, when her most beloved man was being chased by a peerless expert and her closest brother was heavily injured, the Nan Gong family decided to hit them when they were down. The Nan Gong family first tried to ambush Ling Tian, and after being killed by Ling Tian instead, the remaining people actually had the cheek to seek revenge with the Ling family instead of finding a place to hide from the Ling family's revenge. They were shameless to the extreme. Furthermore, they even came with such despicable and vile thoughts in their heads. This was the first time that Ling Chen was truly furious. Her killing intent could no longer be suppressed, and the 10+ years of hidden killing intent was unsealed and unleashed. With the young noble absent and Ling Jian absent, I, Ling Chen, will still be around in the Ling family courtyard. I will not be the one to shame young noble's majesty. All of you can use your lives to fully enjoy my rage. Ling Chen glared at the Nan Gong family members who were pouncing over, and her glare turned cold. Her jade-like hands were then revealed from her sleeves, and a layer of barely visible frosty white fog emanated from underneath her feet. On the ground, a layer of white frost quickly spread out in all directions swiftly, with Ling Chen as the center. Ling Chen remained at the same spot and stood in the middle of the white frost like a jade sculpture. She looked at her enemies coldly, and a merciless, ruthless, and even cruel glow could be seen in her eyes. Before the Nan Gong family members could even reach Ling Chen, the rapidly expanding layer of frost had already extended behind Nan Gongyu. Everywhere the frost expanded to seem to have formed a special domain, and everyone within the domain could not help but shiver uncontrollably. Without an exception. A thunderous roar sounded, and Nan Gong Tian, who descended from the sky with a violent gust of wind. He launched a powerful palm strike towards Ling Chen, and before his palm strike even landed, the winds generated from his palm strike had already sent the dust and vegetation flying. With his acute senses of his yan expert, Nan Gong Tian, who could vaguely feel that Ling Chen wasn't someone easily provoked. This lass was definitely not someone easy to deal with. Thus, he used almost all of his strength in this palm strike of his, and his previously teasing look had completely disappeared. Ling Tian lowered her head, and her body remained motionless like a mountain. She then lifted up her right hand calmly, and when she had raised it halfway, she suddenly flipped her palm up towards the sky and sent out a powerful strike. All of her actions were extremely slow, and each of her actions could be clearly seen by everyone. Coupled with her beautiful appearance, she looked like a fairy dancing beautifully on the moon. However, it was her slow actions that restrained Nan Gong Tian, whose lightning speed. With a loud bang, both of their palms connected. The result of the clash was completely unexpected. Ling Chen's dress fluttered in the wind, and her feet sank into the ground up to her ankles. At the same time, her face flushed red, and her beauty at this very moment was definitely soul-shaking. She then waved her left hand slowly, and when she waved it halfway, A bright light suddenly shone in her palms and a long sword appeared in her hands. With a brilliant and sharp sword ray, it shot through the air. Despite there being so many people around, none of them were able to see when her sword was unsheathed, how it appeared in her hands and where it was kept before this. As the brilliant sword light sliced through the air, the frosty ground was suddenly filled with more than 10 bloody scars. The fresh blood splashing all over the snow-white ground was like bright red flowers blooming all over. The more than 10 warriors of the Nangong family who were in the first wave retreated pitifully with mournful groans and blood sprayed out in all directions from their many wounds. In the end, Ling Tian still could not bear to kill them all directly. She only made them lose the ability to walk by slicing all of the tendons in their ankles or rupturing the arteries on their thighs. The accuracy of her strike and control of her strength was at the level of perfection and made one gasp with admiration. This was the first time Ling Tian launched such a vicious attack. The moment Nangong Tianhu's palm strike connected with Ling Tian, he felt an extremely cold ball of qi assaulting his body. He felt the meridians on his body freezing up and an extremely powerful force striking on his palm. His descending figure then let out an odd groan and he retreated 30 feet away with a mid-air backflip. When he landed on the ground, his face first flushed red before it quickly turned completely pale. His burly figure then shivered vigorously as he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, this mouthful of blood immediately froze upon him spitting it out. A layer of frost covered his right arm and it was as though he had just taken a bath in the ocean and the salt crystals were left on his body after the water evaporated. Nangong Tianhu took in 2 deep breaths and circulated his inner qi a few cycles around his body before he was able to regain movement in his right arm, which was sealed up by the icy cold qi. However, the movement of his right hand was still rigid and when he wanted to clench his fist slightly, cracking sounds were continuously heard. Nangong Tianhu raised his head and looked at Ling Tian's beautiful figure with a look of extreme fear in his eyes. Who said this woman didn't know any martial arts or only had little accomplishment in her martial arts? This darn misinformation is going to cost all of our lives. The martial arts that she has displayed are already above you Man Tian who had beaten me up badly. It may even be higher than that. Nangong Tianhu's judgment was extremely accurate. After Ling Tian consumed the great cyclic pellet, her cultivation was raised to the extreme small success Yan Tian stage and was definitely comparable to Yu Man Lu. After Li Zhu arrived and taught Ling Tian earnestly, Ling Tian achieved another breakthrough and had reached the strength Ling Tian displayed before leaving Sky Bearing, not to mention the fact that Li Zhu was around as reinforcement. Even if Ling Tian was alone, it was more than enough to deal with everyone present. At this moment, Ling Tian did not have the interest to think about Nangong Tianhu's feelings. She had already treated him as a dead man and she would never allow someone who had humiliated her young noble to remain alive in the world. Regardless if it was for herself or for her young noble's prestige. The next moment, Ling Tian stamped her foot, and the ground beneath her began cracking with a loud bang. She then raised her right leg and stamped down again. The soil beneath her feet immediately shot out in all directions, carrying with it her frosty inner qi. Every single fragment was as fast as lightning and they smashed into the formation of the Nangong family warriors. Chapter 495, Shattering the Conspiracy. However, this petite body of Ling Tian was accompanied by a seemingly endless bone-chilling killing intent. What happened next left all those present in shock. Ling Tian's body spun once, and her sword that had disappeared mysteriously reappeared back on her hand. Just as the whole group of men were still staring spellbound, the sword had already accomplished its mission. A whole 27 mournful streams of blood sprayed out into the air, with Ling Tian looking as though she had just finished a beautiful dance, exiting the stage. Her white robes had nary a speck of dust on them, and as for the wildly spewing blood, not even a spot of it landed on her clothes. In that instant, all the tendons of the 27 men present had been completely sliced. One by one, they fell onto the ground, their screams comparable to the whistle of a steam train going at full blast. The remaining 10-odd men who were just about to pounce towards her seemed as though they suddenly suffered from some movement-stopping witchcraft, as all of them paused in their current stance, be it rushing forwards or brandishing their blades. They seemed to have turned into clay figurines, as all of them stood with wide-open eyes and mouths, gazing at the hellish scene before them. No one even noticed the saliva dripping out of their wide-open mouths, so frightening and astonishing was the scene before them. Everyone present was filled with despair without exception, together with incredulity. Nan Gongyu, who had discovered something amiss, stood with her mouth wide open, as her gaze stared straight at Ling Tian. Other than shock, there was a deep grudging hatred in her eyes, a venomous hatred. While she took into account that Ling Tian might possess some sort of martial arts, she never thought that it would be to such an extent. The operation this time was not to assassinate someone, but rather to commit suicide, to be killed. It was the worst fatal disaster the Nangong family could have brought upon themselves. At this moment, she finally realized how great the disparity was between her and Ling Tian. It was akin to the distance between heaven and earth. But it was because of this that the reality of Ling Tian's prowess did not scare her till she fainted, but rather fanned the flames of insanity and urgency within herself. A woman who fell into the depths of jealousy was not someone that could be reasoned with, no matter how frightening the reality that she faced. Li Zhu stealthily knocked the last member of the Nangong family onto the ground, and as she floated over, she calmly noticed every single person still present. She who had undergone 2 lifetimes of experience immediately noticed many things that escaped the gaze of Ling Tian. Ling Tian, who slightly shifting to a position where it was convenient for him to strike, an expert with veins all over firmly gripping onto his sword, as well as 2 other great experts of the Nangong family slowly making their way over to Ling Tian while hiding themselves among the crowd of people. If Ling Tian was not mentally prepared, suddenly receiving the attacks of these few experts, as well as the remaining over 60 enemies who still possessed some modicum of movement, the results would be irreparable. While Ling Tian's skills had already achieved a certain realm, able to place herself amongst the first-rate experts, her battle experience was far from that level. This sort of experience needed to be honed over time, over long periods of fighting, of hovering between life and death, blood and fire, before it could rise. There was no shortcut. The surprising part was that the Ling Tian who possessed unfathomably high martial arts actually had 0 experience when it came to such matters. To Ling Tian, this was a fatal loophole, thus Li Zhu had to be very careful. Proud as she was, Li Zhu had to admit that Ling Tian possessed a special place inside Ling Tian's heart. If anything happened to her, Ling Tian would definitely go insane, and when that happened, not only would he wipe out his enemies, even allies and his loved ones would be annihilated as well. From this point, the decision that the Nangong family made to attack Ling Tian was indeed the best option. For she was the Achilles heel of Ling Tian. As such, Li Zhu would rather that she got into trouble than to allow Ling Tian to suffer a mishap. This was because Ling Tian was the apple of Ling Yan's eye. Thinking this, Li Zhu could not but feel a sense of sorrow and disappointment. As a woman, she actually had to help her man and risk her life for another of his women. What sort of irony was that? If this was her past life, what sort of preposterous matter would this be? However, she was doing it so naturally now, as well as being so calm about it. Could it be that her attitude changed when she crossed over to this new world? But Li Zhu was extremely clear that, no matter what, it was impossible for her to monopolize Ling Tian herself in this lifetime. The consequence of doing so was something Li Zhu did not even want to imagine. Of course, this sort of incident was an impossibility as well. Even if the correct choice was made by their enemy, in order to carry it out, one had to have the strength to back it up. Ling Tian, you're indeed difficult to deal with. I actually underestimated you all this time. Nangong Yu let out a bitter laugh, her eyes filled with a chilly frost. to think that your martial arts were actually at such a stage. It seems like I've most likely lost in today's operation." Within her voice, one could hear a hint of dejection. "Nan Gongyu, I've always admired you, especially your intellect and your talents, however, you've utterly disappointed me today." Ling Chen gazed at Nan Gongyu, indifferently saying, "Your Nan Gong family broke the faith between our two families first, going back on your word and trying to backstab us. Now that things have failed, you guys still have the cheek to come over to seek revenge. Could it be that you'd display your sense of honor in such a way? Furthermore, you want to use me to perform your dirty deeds. Nan Gongyu, you're also a woman, why resort to such venomous methods, such despicable acts?" At the last few words, Ling Chen's voice went up by an octave, revealing a hint of fury. Not just herself, but for any woman that received such a treatment from Nan Gongyu, how could they still survive? Even in death, they would die full of humiliation and shame. Nan Gongyu slowly nodded her head, staring at Ling Chen with empty eyes, before suddenly focusing into a maddened gaze. "Ling Chen. For someone like you, you shouldn't even be alive in this world. What grounds do you have to have all the men only talking about you? What grounds do you have to be Ling Tian's beloved? On what grounds? What grounds? You're merely a lowly slave. A slave to be ordered about, a slave that the nobles use to entertain their guests like a prostitute. On what grounds do you have to obtain what you have? What authority do you have, for a slave of low birth such as you to display this image of a saintess in front of me? Huh?" Nan Gongyu began to frantically holler out, "I just want to cheapen you. I want to violate you. I just want to tear down this false image of a saintess that you put on yourself, and display your true lascivious image for everyone to see. I want to make sure you are ridden on and trampled by 1,000 men, a person whose body even the lowest beggar can enjoy, the filthiest woman on this world." Ha ha ha. A burst of frenzied laughter rang out, and so intense were her emotions that Nan Gongyu actually started to tear up. And her original delicate and pretty face warped into a perverse look full of maliciousness and sinister happiness. An incident that was destined to never happen, flowed out like water from Nan Gongyu's mouth. A woman that has fallen into insanity could not be understood with normal reasoning. Ling Chen immediately quivered with the intensity of the words. While she knew that whatever Nan Gongyu spoke of could not happen, but her words had incited a sort of fear within her inner heart, as well as the sky-burning rage and hatred. Ling Chen's eyes gradually stilled and grew ice-cold, her killing intent so strong that it could actually turn substantial. Not far off, Li Zhu also shivered, muttering to herself, "Crazy. This woman has gone insane. No, from the start, she was already a lunatic." Suddenly, "Careful!" Li Zhu screamed out loud, as she flew forwards, swiftly skimming the area. Just at that moment, while Ling Chen was shaken by Nan Gongyu's words and had just raised her killing intent, sharp killing intents also rose from 3 different angles around her. Nan Gong Tianhu and the remaining 2 great elderly experts of the Nan Gong family took this chance to move, their target being Ling Chen. Their positions sealed off any form of escape that Ling Chen had, and all 3 of them immediately put forth their strongest moves, entering the highest realm of the Nan Gong family's famed sword god Manuel, sword and body as one. 3 razor-sharp sword lights shot towards the same objective, congregating in the center. This was the deciding blow of the remaining 3 experts of the Nan Gong family. Everyone knew that even if only one was alive in the end, so long as they killed Ling Chen, the operation would still be a success. As such, this blow of theirs held nothing back. It was a blow made with all their lives. At the same time, Nan Gongyu, who was in front of Ling Chen, behaved like an insane beast as she drew her sword and dashed towards Ling Chen as well, a crazed fierceness on her eyes and smile. Ling Chen no doubt received a huge shock, hurriedly revolving her divine eyes formula to the maximum, her body spinning rapidly within an extremely small area. Her feet constantly intertwined, and as her body spun like a windmill, the exquisite powers of her divine eyes formula were emitted in waves without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, Ling Tian had already sent out 79 palm strikes. The sound of her palms impacting the body sounded out continuously, accompanied by the cracking sounds of bones shattering. The first 3 experts who had pounced forward each received more than 10 palm strikes from her, but they behaved like iron men who could not be beaten down, stealing their tenacious fighting spirit to keep forging on, their swords still pointing relentlessly towards Ling Tian even though their sword lights had already been shattered. They had to kill Ling Tian at all costs, even at the cost of taking her down with themselves. This fighting spirit, this determination, the complete strength of these 3 people, relying on their vitality to complete this almost impossible move. They were this close to succeeding. If it was not for Li Zhu. With a clear whistle, Li Zhu was like the heavenly general descending onto earth, as her short sword flashed and carved out a glittering icy river. From the sky down to the ground, it was as though the river had become real, sundering the heavens and earth itself. She protected Ling Tian and herself behind this ephemeral ray of light that formed the river of ice. Chapter 496, Forced to a Corner. Poo 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 came the countless sounds, followed by a loud explosion, as those who clashed abruptly separated. Ling Tian and Li Zhu stumbled as they retreated, with Ling Tian bleeding from her left arm, shoulder, and chest, staining her originally pure white robes. Li Zhu had helped Ling Tian to take the majority of the impact, absorbing practically all the force generated between their collision. The pure internal energy collision was not something that could be nullified easily, and while Li Zhu had movement techniques that surpassed Ling Tian, she had no way to dodge in this scenario. While she had no external injuries, the impact her internal organs had suffered was not light. Her tiny mouth opened wide as a huge mouthful of fresh blood was vomited out. Her eyes immediately dimmed, and she had to forcefully will herself to prop up her body. As for the 3 Nangongs, the 2 elders had already turned into pieces of icy slush the moment they were thrown back, filling up the entire sky. Under the frenzied brandishing of Li Zhu's sword in retaliation, the 2 of them suffered from the torture of 1,000 cuts to the point that not even a complete skeleton remained. As for Nangong Tian who had a higher cultivation, because he was ambushing towards the rear of Ling Tian, he was spared the brunt of Li Zhu's assault. However, he had eaten the majority of Ling Tian's palms, and as his corpse flew up high, the blood he spat froze into a piece of ice even as he slowly turned into a popsicle in midair. Bah! Nangong Tian who viciously smashed on the ground, but instead of letting out the sound of a low grunt, a crisp shattering sound was heard, as though a porcelain vase had fallen off the roof. Under the dumbfounded gazes of all present, Nangong Tian whose body shattered into a multitude of various-sized frozen pieces, even the organs being preserved in a perfect state without a single drop of blood flowing out. Of those surrounding the duo, Nangong Yu had put in the most effort. However, due to her skill being the weakest, she was repelled by the strong counterforce of Li Zhu's internal energy even as she threw herself forward. She felt as though her entire body had broken apart, and she was totally unable to even pick herself up. Her hate-filled, venomous eyes finally revealed the look of despair one shows when their armies are routed. Li Zhu had just managed to stand upright when she let out a light cry. Though her voice made the cry sound sweet, the killing intent within was impossible to hide. She immediately threw herself into the crowd of assailants like a whirlwind, beginning her killing. The cry she let out, under the effects of her internal energy, traveled far and wide, and the moment the sound ended, a few tiny specks appeared on the horizon. Those specks were precisely Ling Li and his group. With Li Zhu's cry awakening her from the stupor, Ling Tian, who had just undergone a baptism of life and death, was determined not to be outdone. She immediately threw herself into the fray as well. Sound after sound of agonized wails could be heard, as the remaining men from the Nangong family were scared out of their wits by these two ladies, unable to even utilize half of their strength. Everyone only had the thought to run as far as they could, however, under the ghostly movements of these two ladies, who could even escape from them? On one side, the morale was as high as rainbows, the other as low as a collapsed mountain. There was no way to rewrite history at this point, let alone the fact that there were still reinforcements of the winning side coming over. Ling Tian retained her usual stance of only ensuring that they were immobilized, but Li Zhu was acting strange now, only maiming instead of killing them up front. It was just that the people she injured were all in much worse states as compared to those handled by Ling Tian, with the lightest injury being amputated limbs, turning the people into cripples. By the time Ling Li and his group managed to arrive, there were less than 10 people who were still standing, and under the tyrannical strength of the Ling group, the entire battlefield took on a completely one-sided victory, with all of the Nangong's people being taken prisoner in just a few moments. Of the 135 people activated in the Nangong family for the operation this time around, 39 were killed on the spot, leaving 96 alive as prisoners, without even one person escaping. Looking at Ling Tian's wounds as well as the dismal expression on Li Zhu's face, Ling Lei clenched his teeth, furiously staring at the Nangong people who were being gathered into a heap. His eyes looked as though they could spew fire at this very instant. "Sister Chen, how do we deal with these prisoners?" Ling Lei questioned. Before Ling Tian could open her mouth, Li Zhu's clear voice had already traveled over. "We of course have to deal with them, and it has to be this little sister Ling Tian to personally deal with them, to be considered just. Such despicable people who are worse than beasts, furthermore attempting to shame and humiliate her, shouldn't she herself deal with them to make herself feel better?" Ling Tian started, and a complex expression surfaced on her face as she carefully spoke. "Why does elder sister say so? This group can be left for Ling Lei to deal with, why do I?" Li Zhu heartless refused her with a wave of her hand, resolutely snapping, "Not this time. I require you to personally act." She turned around, facing Ling Tian straight on. "Don't tell me you still wish to run away from this. You need to know that right now, you're not living for only yourself." Li Zhu coldly laughed, as she pointed to the prone Nangong Yu on the ground. "Have you ever thought? If Nangong Yu's plan had succeeded today, do you know what would have happened? Do you know how serious things would have become?" Ling Tian sighed. She knew that Li Zhu made sense, at the same time feeling the anger that she had vented through the fight just now beginning to rise once again. Li Zhu was right, the actions of Nangong Yu today could be said to be unpardonable even through death, but she just could not make the final move. Li Zhu coldly snorted as she continued to stare at Ling Tian. "If their plan had succeeded by a fluke, you would have been subjected to an inhumane treatment, the most malicious humiliation in this world, as well as a disaster the likes of which you cannot imagine. On one hand, it would affect all the deployment of the Ling family courtyard, and secondly, Tian''G.T. would go insane when he heard about what happened to you. Under such circumstances, Ling Tian would have no more misgivings, and once he explodes, what do you think everyone will face? To put it in another way, you should understand the feelings Tian''G.T. has towards you, as well as understand what sort of person he is. He would destroy everything in this world for you, including himself." Li Zhu replied in a heavy tone, "If the entire Ling family's influence was to collapse and fall into ruin because of you, causing over 10,000 deaths including your beloved, then how could you still not bear to kill the mastermind behind this whole incident when he or she is in front of you? Is this cowardice or foolishness? Such kind-heartedness, if you continue to maintain this image, sooner or later, you will drag everyone down into hell together with you. I've also said it previously, that you are not just living for yourself now. Your greatest objective in life now is to stay alive for him. Those people who aim to sabotage him or his matters, how should you treat them? This is the time to make such a decision. Ling Tian opened her eyes wide in astonishment, a fierce jolt in her heart. She stared at Li Zhu in a daze, unconsciously taking a step back in fright. However, Li Zhu continued to pressure her to no end, her eyes seeming to see straight into the depths of her heart. Do you know why Nangong Yu would choose you of all people instead of choosing others such as old Madame Ling? It is because you are too soft-hearted. And far too naive. Furthermore, you matter the most to Ling Tian. Of course, the most important thing is that they do not dare. They are afraid to antagonize Ling Tian himself as well as his family members, thus they come after you. Think about just now, if I wasn't by your side. What would have happened to you? Ling Tian. Listen carefully to what I'm going to say next. Such things will become commonplace in the future, where every single influence will think of such methods. However, the operations in the future will not merely consist of this paltry strength that the Nangong family brought today. And we ultimately can't always be your shadows, following you every single split second. There will be times when you are left alone. Furthermore, once war begins in the future, you will need to take charge of a group. Your excessive tendency to clemency will only lead to a funeral procession for you. A funeral procession for your friends near you, your relatives, your love. If you do not wish to suffer a greater loss from your own misgivings, if you do not wish to become the fatal burden of your loved one, then just becoming strong isn't enough. You need to learn how to be sufficiently ruthless and vicious. Knowing how blood tastes and smells like, knowing how to kill, how to rob someone of their lives. Only then can you become a true stepping stone for him. As such, now, take up your sword, and kill all those present now. Go. Clang. Li Zhu stretched out her hand, pulling out Ling Tian's sword from the sheath, and reversing her grip, threw it into Ling Tian's right hand, an unforgiving light within her eyes. Catch. Ling Tian subconsciously received the sword, her face turning into a deathly white color even as the sword in her hands began to tremble. The point faced towards an immobile expert of the Nangong family, and the light refracting off the trembling sword turned it into something similar to a darting snake. Even after a long period of time, the sword was still unable to pierce forward. For someone who has not killed before, if that person accidentally killed someone, or had killed out of necessity like within a battlefield, they would probably feel a smaller amount of shock. But under the gazes of many, to thrust out a sword and kill someone who had no resistance at all, this sort of visual stimulation was a huge torture to anyone, let out a young lady who had not previously killed. Cold sweat had already started to appear on the forehead of Ling Tian. She was not at such a loss even during the previous intense battle. Ling Tian was extremely clear in her heart that following the increase in Ling Tian's strength, he would one day wipe out all under heavens. As his #1 assistant, to avoid being stained with blood was something that she could not escape from. At least, she hoped that the day would be delayed for as long as possible. However, Li Zhu had surprisingly seen through her hesitation today and thus started to pressure her. Li Zhu was clear that based on Ling Tian's pure and kind character, if one did not continuously pressure her bottom line, most likely, it would be too far-fetched to think about the day where Ling Tian would break past her phobia. Right now, all the warning signals were showing towards the world getting more chaotic. Thus, she could not afford to guide Ling Tian patiently and systematically, and could only resort to this cruel method to completely break her tiny bubble as well as her fantasies. Only then would she be able to really be of help to Ling Tian when the war started, and truly display her abilities. Thus, the circumstances completely warranted for this sort of compulsion. Especially with the provocation from the Nangong family, to Li Zhu, this was like a heaven-sent chance for Ling Tian to allow fury to overwhelm her own heart's barriers. Chapter 497, Cruel Metamorphosis. As such, Li Zhu's coercion of Ling Tian, while cruel, was something that was needed. This was especially when there was still remnant forces of the Nangong family present. To Li Zhu, this was the best opportunity for Ling Tian. If she could surpass her own limits here, then her future would no longer be clogged up. If she refused to do the final blow, then she would also lose the right to be the most loved of Ling Tian, and also the position of Ling Tian's spokesperson. Li Zu would then suggest for the Ling family courtyard to have a change of leading personnel. But neither Li Zu nor Ling Tian would want to see a change in the head. Ling Chen only felt her brain in a perplexed mess. While her hand still held onto her sword, facing the eyes in front of her begging for pity, she could not make the final blow. However, she suddenly felt her elbow jolting forward without control, followed by an agonized wail. The sword in her hands had already pierced through the man's chest. A look of despair appeared on that person's eyes, and he stared straight at Ling Chen as a stream of blood slowly flowed out between his lips. He started to produce gurgling sounds in his throat before he slowly slumped onto the ground. He had truly died this time. The first one. Ling Chen let out a loud cry, her voice extremely sharp and piercing as her figure suddenly retreated. On the sword that she still held, drops of blood flowed off from the body of the sword. Her heart was even more perplexed at this time, together with an unspeakable feeling of disgust rising up within her. She suddenly spun around, beginning to vomit in copious amounts as though trying to flood the dams and seas. It was only after a long time that Ling Chen finally straightened her waist. Her face still remained pale beyond belief, a disorderly look in her eyes, with her body tottering on the spot as though she had no more strength left. The palpitations of her heart, the fear, disgust, still lingered within her mind, impossible to get rid of. Ling Lei and company were naturally the most heartbroken upon seeing Ling Chen's state, but none of them opened their mouths to prevent this situation. For them, as killers belonging to the first pavilion, the top-tier assassins of this world, they were crystal clear on the feeling one would have upon killing someone for the first time, for they had walked the very same path long ago. Everyone present knew of Ling Chen's drawback, but nobody dared to force this big sister of theirs. Now that Li Zu had decided to be the villain this time around, Ling Lei and group did not know whether to be resentful or to feel gratitude towards her. To utilize such methods to force Ling Chen to metamorphosize, only Li Zu would be capable of such a feat. Even Ling Tian was not an exception, for he could not force himself to perform such a matter. Li Zu coldly stared at Ling Chen, the emotions within her eyes constantly fluctuating, but she suppressed her emotions. She knew that being soft-hearted to Ling Chen now would be detrimental to her, Ling Tian, as well as all the Ling family members in the future. Li Zu would never allow her history to be repeated in this life, thus she chose to be ruthless. If no one wants to be the villain, then let me take the role. If you people cannot bear to do it, then I'll be the one with the heart of stone. Good. Wasn't that a relief, quick and simple? Right now, lift up your sword, and aim towards the second person. Kill him. Li Zu crossed her arms and coldly continued. Standing by the side, Ling Lei and the rest cast their worried gazes towards Ling Chen, but nobody dared to breathe a word. This was a process she had to go through, and all of them present understood that. The only person who could not understand this entire process was Ling Chen. No. No. Ling Chen began to tremble. Sister Li, I can't do it. Stop forcing me, I beg you. Sister Chen, you must do it. Li Zu softly, yet firmly replied, the people in front of you are all our enemies. If they do not die, then we will be the ones who die instead. The logic is simple. Okay, calm yourself down, do not panic. That's right. Now, exert all your strength. As she spoke, the sword on Ling Chen's hands pushed forward once again, and blood spurted. She had killed another person. From today onward, these 96 people present, you have to kill 10 every day, splitting these people up into 10 days to kill. Starting from the 5th day, every person you kill must be through a unique method, such as piercing their heart, or beheading, and dismembering. Whatever the case, by the end of 10 days, The lives of these 96 people, including Nan Gongyu, must all be ended by your very own hands. You have to try all sort of methods to end their lives, do you understand me? Li Zhu looked at Ling Chen in pity, but she did not get soft-hearted. I can't. Ling Chen began to feel another wave of nausea. I won't be able to. I can't. As for today's quota of 10 people, you've only fulfilled 2. Continue. Li Zhu seemed to not have heard Ling Chen's protest. There are still 8 more, hurry and finish up so we can all return. If you really wish to bring them back to the base before beginning your slaughter, that's also up to you. Li Zhu's words were said in an indifferent tone, with a hint of mischievousness, as though saying, there are 8 grapes left, hurry and finish them. Her tone sounded amazingly casual. However, the moment Ling Chen heard the words if you really wish to bring them back to the base before beginning your slaughter, that's also up to you, she could not help but turn around and vomit once again. These were humans that she was talking about, living humans. Slaughtering? Could it be that her sister Li Zhu treated them as livestock? This is your mission. You have to complete it. So long as you finish this mission, after the 10 days, I can rest assured in leaving you to do whatever you want, neither will I interfere in any of your decisions. However, if you cannot do it, then that would be failing to live up to his expectations. Li Zhu coldly stated, you had best hurry up, right now there's only Ling Lei and the rest, all of which are assassins of the first pavilion and have thus seen past life and death. The scene doesn't matter much to them, but if you do this back in the base, then it will affect the influence and prestige which you hold. Once that is negatively impacted, you will also directly affect his career. I believe you do not wish to see such a scene, right? Ling Chen's lips trembled, as she lifted up her sword with difficulty. Suddenly the sword in her hand seemed to have multiplied by thousands of times in weight, seemingly impossible to hold. Some people are like venomous snakes, seeing them makes you disgusted, and killing them even worse. However, if you fail to eliminate them, allowing them to bite you in return, that would result in your fatality. At that time, the one dead would be you instead. Li Zhu indifferently remarked, a human life is actually similar to that of a pig, or a snake. In the end, it's just a life. You, me, Ling Tian are all the same. It's either you die, or I die. As such, might as well live, it's better than dying. I hope that you can think this through quickly, because... At this point, Li Zhu's eyes flashed brightly. In the future, the number of people that die by your hand will not end at 96. It will be multiplied by hundreds, even thousands of times. If you do not adapt fast enough, by that time, just the blood spraying into the air will make you faint. It would only make you become the fish on someone else's chopping board. Li Zhu's eyes stared at the distances, her voice unbearably lonely as she continued, you can never imagine how crazy the battlefield is, how violent. If you cannot get used to bloodshed soon, then you will be unable to set a single step on the battlefield, let alone command thousands of troops. By that time, if you're still sentimental and soft-hearted, you will only send all your comrades into their graves. As such, these people in front of you have to be killed, and killed easily at that. Even if you feel like you're undergoing 1,000 types of torture, so much pain that you wish you were dead, you still have to kill. Li Zhu heartlessly looked at Ling Chen. If you feel that you cannot make a move, then I can help you. Ling Chen immediately perked up at that. Sister is great. Come help me. However, Li Zhu's lips twisted into a bitter smile. My idea of help is something you cannot accept. Do you want to hear it? Still smiling at Ling Chen, she continued, I'll lock you in together with them and kill a few, filling up the room with the smell of blood before sealing the door. Only when you've killed all of them will I then let you out. Believe me, I will do as I said. Once I decide on something, no one can stop me, not even him. Seeing the smile on Li Zhu's face, Ling Chen suddenly felt as though she was looking at a ghost, and with a wah sound, she vomited once again. This sister Li Zhu was too ruthless. Throw everyone inside, kill a few people to add on to the bloodshed? Thinking about this image, Ling Tian felt as though she was going to faint, let alone mention being there in person. If you want to kill them on your own, I will give you 10 days. If you want my help, that will be different, for the time you walk out will be the time the training ends. If you agree to it, I can arrange it for you. By the way, if you can kill all of them present in one day, that is a good and simple way to settle everything as well. Li Zhu concluded. I think I'll do it myself. Ling Tian could acutely feel her dry lips, and with difficulty swallowed once in fright. Then begin. We don't have that much time. Li Zhu gazed up at the sky. The lady from the Shui family should be just about arriving to look for you. Ling Tian took in a deep breath, suddenly snapping her eyes shut and brandishing her sword, sending the head of another person flying into the air. Her arm waved around crazily without stopping, finally stopping and returning to her side. All the while, her eyes remained closed, and only felt droplets of something warm splashing onto her face, while her stomach started to heave once again. Li Zhu sighed in dissatisfaction, but seeing her pale white face, she knew that Ling Tian had probably reached her limits. She could only gently speak, "Today shall be considered a special day, we will stop here. Sister Chen, remember clearly that these people are all out to harm you and him. If you land in their hands, you won't have a chance to beg before being cut into pieces. Unless you are willing to see your beloved being dismembered rather than killing your enemy, I suggest you stop being soft-hearted. I will not force you anymore. However, you had better take out your ruthlessness if you do not want to die in someone else's hands. Kill all the people here within 10 days, and that would be the best help to your man, allowing him to carve out his career in the heavens." Seeing Ling Tian with her head down in deep thought, Li Zhu stood in silence for a moment before commanding, "Drag these people back to the Ling family courtyard."
Thank you for your continued following. Please support us by subscribe to encourage our continued creation. And press the bell to notify new chapter from us. Thank you.